Hey there. So it's time to wrap up this series of tutorials. And the last thing we need to take a look at is how we're going to composite this all together to create a cool image. There are a lot of things that I would like to change about this model. And there are a lot of things I'd like to change about some of these tutorials. But we're under a really tight deadline. So we're going to see what we can do with what we have. So first, let me show you the final image. So there's been a lot of work done on the eyes. We've put a depth of field in here. We've added eyes for the snakes, added some venom around the fangs, and done our best to create a really cool image. So how do we start that process? The first thing that we have to do is inside of ZBrush, we need to get our model on the canvas and we need to choose the view that's going to really work for us. So let's say this is the view that we want to be using. Let's zoom out of our canvas and make sure that we can see this entire area. Make sure that we're really utilizing as much of it as we can. And once we've set on a particular angle, we want to store that by going to Z-App Link and just press front. You can press any of these buttons, it doesn't matter. And then just make sure to save that. That way, if ZBrush crashes or you need to make a change, start with a new document, it's very easy to bring that back in. The other thing that you need to make sure you do is increase your document size. Have to increase the document size. This is going to be good for sculpting, but it's not going to get us anywhere near print quality. All you have to do though is double it. I'm going to avoid doubling just because it's going to slow my system down while I record and render a 22 million poly model and all that stuff. So it just adds too much of a lag for me to teach. So I'm going to leave it at this, but keep in mind you should press it. Then the next thing that we do is we simply drop out of edit mode. That's all we got to do. Then we want to go to document and we want to say save as. And we'll save this as, let's just say, main. And the first pass, the first render pass that I really want to export out of here is a color pass, which is very easy for me to get. I just go into the render tab and press flat. And so I've got color information only, no shading. I go to document, I export, I call this color, and we're ready to go. Now I'm going to switch back to preview mode, and the next thing that we have to do is we have to bring in all of our different materials for our render passes. The last one we're going to do is the shadow. So we want to make sure that we turn shadow off before we continue. And we want to make sure that this model has all one material, only one material. One thing that you can do, you go to the material tab, just press show used, and you can see there's 3 different materials being used on the canvas. I really only want one, and I want one that's expendable. So I'm going to select the jelly bean, switch over to the simple brush, turn M on and Z add off. What that's done is set it up so that I can simply paint material, nothing else. And I'm going to increase my draw size and paint away. Now this entire model is covered with that material. If I press show used, that'll be the only one that shows. Now the other thing we have to do is remove the color information. So I'm actually going to switch back over to mRGB. Make sure RGB intensity is 100%. Make sure it's set to white and simply repeat that. Okay. So now with this set up, all I've got to do, save this guy. So let's save this as render pass base. And we're going to start to import in materials to allow us to kind of move forward pretty quickly. So we're going to go load, and we're going to navigate to the materials and try to find the material that we really want to work with first. Let's go to shade actually. I'm going to go open, and there we go. Now, because I loaded the material while I had the jelly bean material active, it simply swapped them out, which swapped out everything on my canvas. Now, this material is going to be used as our shading base, and in order to use this correctly, we really need to set up the lighting. So we probably should have set the lighting up in advance before getting to this stage, but we can do it at this stage. So the lights are set up and handled in the light palette here. And what I'm going to do is turn the first 3 on, and I'm going to go back and select the main one and simply start to position it, I think, slightly above, facing down. Yes, that's the kind of light that we want. Just experiment, see what works for you. You may want to turn shadows back on just for this part. One thing to note though is that this isn't really a ray trace shadow. In order for you to see a ray trace shadow, you really have to select best. It's going to go through its process, and what it gives you will be a fairly solid ray trace. There are some variables we're going to go over here as soon as this is done. One of the big variables is that this is very soft. So the properties for that are handled here in the shadow subpalette, and you just lower the aperture. Let's set this aperture down to 13, go to render and press render. Now we've got much harder shadows. That's much more what we're going for. Now something else that you need to make sure you do is set length all the way to 500. I'll explain while it does that. Length represents the distance inside the ZBrush canvas that the shadow will travel. This is put in place to help ZBrush handle really large canvases and memory loads. Bit of a legacy from older days. But notice that more shadow is creeping up. Shadow is coming down here that wasn't there before. And that's because this nose is more than 100 pixels in ZBrush space from down here. Keep in mind, ZBrush sees things in Z depth as well, so that's quite important to factor into your equation. But I'd say this is really a cool light setup. Wish I would use this one on the other setting. And we need to just adjust a few things. One, I'm going to select this light. This is really our fill light. And I want to move this just to the opposite. It's rendering, so I'm going to escape out of that. And I'm going to lower the intensity. And I'm going to kill the ambient. Let it do its thing. And then the next one that we're going to look at is the bottom light, this next bottom orange one. And that's really actually by default set up as a rim light. So these first 3 lights are set up so that there's a main light that you can move around, and then a fill light, and then here's your rim. How do I know it's a rim light? It's got radial active. And this rim light can be increased to add a little bit more intensity. One thing that you can do is add a color there. But as you'll see when we get over to Photoshop, I actually color the lights in a different way. Now that rim light really was too dramatic. So I'm going to open up my intensity curve and really drop that down. Let's just escape out of that, and I'm going to do one more. I'm going to set my focal shift About there. Let's see how that affects it. All right, much harder. Much harder edged shadows, I should say. With just a nice little hit of the rim. Now, once you have a light setup that works for you, it is wise to save that. You save it by just going up to the light, save, and just call it whatever you want, and there you go. So now you've got a document, you've got your light set up. So let's turn our shadow off. And we can keep best render on because that's just a slightly higher quality for some of our renders. We'll keep in mind when to turn them off. So now we have the shading layer without shadows. We're just going to export this as shade. And I call it shade B because that was the material. And then I'm going to load my next material, which is a matte cap red wax. And I've just saved this out so that I can reload it back in. So that it just swaps out of this one material. But it's not working well with best on. And I like this for giving me a bit of warmth in certain areas. Now I'm going to load the next material, which is, let's say, a specular material. This is also really good, best rendered. And export. And then let's load the next one, which is a anisotropic specular, and export that. Let's take a look at the settings of that anisotropic specular real quick. This anisotropic specular setting down here is what has changed that specularity from a normal specularity to something that is going to work better for the snakes, in my view. We'll of course have to mask out the face so that it's only affecting the snakes, but we'll get there. All right, so is there any other materials to load? Yes, the shadow material. So the shadow material is pretty important. I've got the diffuse set all the way to 100. Got the diffuse curve set so that there's absolutely no gradation in tone. It's just 100% white. This is better than ambient because ambient's going to overwrite your shadow. So now we're just going to turn shadow back on. Best is on. So it's going to render us out an image where the light is hitting is white and the shadow should be in full effect. Export this. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you've doubled your document size, that might take you a fair bit of time. In my document, which was twice this size, it actually took me 4 minutes to render a shadow. Longest operation I've experienced inside of ZBrush, that's for sure. But gave me the shadow, and we moved on from there. Now, the final thing is that we have to actually render out the masks. So make sure that you have saved this document, and you may want to turn shadow off before you save it. I can't remember if that gets transferred in with the document or not. I don't think so, but just in case. And we need to start over with another document, or if you don't want to go through the whole process of clearing and double, you just clear it by pressing Control-N or Layer Clear. Make sure that you have selected the Medusa model or whichever model you're working with in the palette. Draw that onto the canvas and then immediately go into edit mode. So now our model can be rotated around, and we just need to get it back into that position by going to Document, Front. Cool. Now let's go turn preview on. Yes. And let's set our material to anything. Let's say a matte cap gray. And we're going to have to go subtool by subtool and fill the model with a color, individual color. So I'm going to drag the color swatch over to the side. So fill object is visible. And the face, I'm going to say, gets filled with white. Then the teeth are going to get filled with red. The eyes, slightly, well, let's just say orange. The hair is going to get filled with yellow. The eyebrows and the eyelash are going to get filled with green. And we just have to go through bit by bit and say and adjust the color of our model. Okay, so there we have set individual colors for all of our subtools, all the ones that we really want to isolate. Then we just have to go to the render palette, turn flat on, and export this document. And with that done, we can just drop out of edit mode and even go to the document and save this as a separate masks doc. And our job in ZBrush is largely done at this point. We have shadows, masks, a shade layer, red wax, color, and a couple of other layers to help us start to create the look that we're going for. So now we need to get ourselves into Photoshop. Now inside of Photoshop, we've got all of our layers set up, and all of their blending modes have been established. So let's walk through exactly what that is. Of course, we've got our mask layer, our color layer. This is set to a normal mode. We've got shade B, which is our shading layer, set to soft light. Looks a little weird till we turn shadows on and everything comes together. Shadows is set to multiply, and the opacity is going to be a bit lower. Specularity is on, and it's set to screen. Anisotropic specularity is set to screen as well. And this whole arrangement gives us this first pass that we need to kind of go to the next level. So let's see where we've taken this. Now this is the next step for me, and you can see I've got a lot more layers, and I've got layer masks and a whole bunch of other stuff. So let's walk through what we did. So again, starting with color layer and a shading layer. Now something that I did to the shading layer was to establish a bit of a color temperature. Let's just zoom in. So in the light color, I created another layer set to color that just added some blues, a little bit cooler temperatures in here, and then I warmed it all back up with the red wax that was set to hue. And I felt that kind of worked pretty well. So shadow is really important. Shadows multiply. Opacity is 77. You can see when I turn red wax on, everything just warms up. Quite nice. Now, I also inverted red wax and created just some deep, let's turn the background layer on. There we go. Just some kind of patches in there to catch a little bit cooler areas of the skin. And then I also gave the whole thing a bit of a cool cast from the light up above, just to give it a very distinct color. Now the specularity is set so that normal specularity is on the face, and then the anisotropic specularity is on the snakes. So the way we set that up is pretty simple. Let's just delete the layer masks. I'm just clicking on the layer mask and dragging to the trash can. And what we're going to do is select the mask layer that's at the very bottom. This is the one with the colors. Select the magic wand, and I'm going to select all the snakes while pressing Shift. There we go. Okay, and so anisotropic specularity, we want that to apply only to the snakes. So we're just going to go to Layer, Layer Mask, reveal just this selection. Take it off of everything else. Now the specularity, we want that to only belong to the face, the eyebrows, the eyes. Well, we could get it off the eyebrows actually. I had to paint it off the eyebrows later. And let's make sure we put it on the mouth. The whole mouth, just in case. Anything else that we need to include? Make sure we get this bottom area. Yes. Then select the specularity, layer, reveal selection. Now I duplicated this layer and just set it right on top to just add a little bit of extra. But this can also be dialed in just to give a little bit of a medium blend in between there. Just a little bit extra. So that's all fairly basic. The eyes of the snakes was all added, including her eyes, by just taking a little gander around Flickr and Google and looking for snake eyes. Pretty straightforward thing to do. The eyes are extracted out and just put over the top with lighter color and linear color. So let's see, where's those eyes? You can see this one here, rattlesnake eyes, and just set to linear light. Her eyes are also rattlesnake eyes, but the hue has been shifted slightly towards the blue. You can shift the hue of something by going into the Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and then just drag this slider around. Then I add a hits pass, add some stuff, gunk in the mouth for this guy, and then just darken the eyes and maybe hit some reflections on the snake eyes, just things that need a little bit extra. And then over the top of that entire thing, we do a hue and saturation. So if I recreate that, it's as simple as just being right here above hits, clicking my adjustment layers, going hue and saturation, and then desaturating this downwards. Now I'm going to click the menu, this little section bar here at the top. That's going to collapse it. That way I'm not looking at it. And then the next thing that we have to do is merge all of this into one image that we can kind of work with and develop further. So the way that we do that is we select the entire area of the model, just the model, not the background at this stage. Press and hold Alt, go to the little triangle here, and it's off of my recording screen, but you can see I'm close to this. It's called Merge Layers, and then it will create an entirely new layer. All of these will still be there intact, and this will be merged and ready for you to adjust and tweak. And there is absolutely adjustment and tweaking that you have to do. You want to zoom in to 100%. You want to select the smudge brush, very low draw size, and you're going to want to go over the entire image, all of the areas where one form butts into another form, to just get rid of this pixelation that ZBrush's canvas does. Now you can also just up-res this to get rid of a lot of this, but in this case I went over the entire image, everywhere that there are forms connecting to each other, and just really worked it. Now if I zoom in real close, you can see the artifacting that we're trying to adjust a little bit better. So you want to just blend these in. You don't want anything to be that hard of a transition. Painters get soft edges for free. We have to work at it in CG. But we have undo. They don't. Careful, don't go too crazy with that smudge. But that's the basics of my first pass, or sorry, the second pass. So let's take a look at the third pass. A lot of stuff. Definitely took a lot of time to work on this image, mostly to just figure out workflows and get my head around everything. But let's turn off the final image and start over. So here is what I call the source, which is exactly what you guys saw. So that's exactly what we have in Comp 2. And I have merged the source into my first pass. So I have a merged pass 1. And at the base of that is this image that we were just tweaking. So it's called merged base. And then I have a version of that called merged clean, which has all of the smudging done to it. So all the areas that needed to be cleaned up, tidied up, have been tidied up. And then I duplicate merge clean and blur this, surface blur. I set radius to 1 and thresholds to 19. And then just set that opacity somewhere around 50% or so. So that's going to help soften some of these hard lines that are happening in the skin that I didn't want to go through and blend. So it's just going to soften them. Then I need to make sure that the eyes are undisturbed. So I need to make sure that I go reveal all in the layer mask. Make sure black is selected, select the brush. And I need to paint black into the eyes. But make sure that you're painting that in the layer mask here. And then this will allow you to show those eyes as they are originally, a little bit sharper. So everything else will get blurred except for the eyes. Not a bad idea to do that. Yikes, for the teeth as well. I really wanted people to be looking at these teeth, spend a lot of time on them. So there you go. Now, once all that's done, I needed to go in and deal with the hair. And the hair was done just by grabbing some photo reference, some stuff from 3D.sk, which is just an amazing resource. And I brought the shadow layer in as well, the shadow layer from before. And so let's unparent that. And if we zoom out, that's our shadow layer from before. So this is going to help give me the shading that I need on the hair layer itself. So I'm just going to parent it and set it to multiply. If it's not on, the hair is not going to behave well. Then you've got some extra little touches in another layer, just trying to tweak it and give it a little bit more life. Eyebrows at this point are done, and the eyebrows are done by using a brush and very low and simply bringing the color from the skin into the eyelash. This is too dramatic. I did it much more sensitive than this, but, well, sort of. You'll be the judge. And just brought it in. So this gives me the chance to really make that more natural. Sort of. Best I can do. Final layer on that first pass is a dodge and burn layer. This is essentially a 50% gray layer where I paint white and dark. And it's set to overlay. So that will simply darken some areas, lighten some other areas, and give me the chance to add some modeling to this that wasn't there before. And then once all that's done, I select all of this, do the same thing, press and hold Alt, go to my triangle here, say Merge Visible. And then I drag this combined image into another area, and I start to work that. So this is pass 2. Fine-tuning, getting myself down to completion. And let's just turn all of those other guys off. And what we have to do here is work with a little bit more smudging. We've got to fix a few things, and then we've got to do our depth of field. So here's our pass with the background. We did the exact same process, select all of it, Alt, Merge, but we made sure to select the background layer. The reason we did that is because we wanted to have a background layer for the lens blur. The lens blur was not going to behave correctly if we didn't. So we have gone ahead and added our lens blur. We've done this by going into Filter, Blur, and Lens Blur. But there's one step that I forgot to show you guys, and that is how to grab this image. This is a Z depth out of ZBrush. But I can tell you really simply that all you have to do is you go to the Alpha palette in ZBrush, you click the Grab Dock button. That will grab a Z depth image of your canvas, and you just export that. And then you've got this here. So all you've got to do is Control A, Control C to copy it, go to Channels, create a new channel, Control V to paste it. Then when you come in here to your pass with the background, you can just go to Blur, Lens Blur. It's going to take a second. And mine's already grabbing from it, but you want to, in depth map, set the source to be alpha 1 or 2, whichever one has your depth mask. And I'm going to set this to 50%. And in my case, the focal distance of a 144 is what really worked to keep the eyes in focus and everything else blurred. So I've just set my radius to 13, and I did want some of the specular highlight to blow out. So I adjusted my brightness and threshold, as you can see. Added a tiny bit of noise, tiny bit, and then hit OK. When that was done, gave me this image. The snakes blurred out. And then I repeated the process, duplicated this pass with the background, without the depth of field. And used the depth of field, but this time with the goal of having the snake visible and the face blurred out. So if I was to get rid of the layer there, you can see that in this layer the snake is visible, the face is blurred out. But I created a layer mask, and I was able to get the face so that it was fairly clear, and then this rattler head was fairly clear. Now, the last problem I had to deal with is the fact that this rattlesnake body just looks wrong. Probably is wrong. I was sculpting it really fast and just piecing it together, but pretty easy to fix that. And then another little adjustment right in here. The process was really simple. It's just a matter of coming into one of these layers, whichever one is going to have the blur that you're going to work with. So in this case, the snake body is actually coming from this render pass here. I'm going to switch over to the quick select tool, select the body. Let's Control D to deselect. Make sure we're here. Select the body of the rattler. Control J to copy that into its own layer. Control T to transform it. Right click and warp. And we're in business. And let's just exit out of that. And there you go. A little bit of erasing, and we're on our way. So I repeated that process for this other snake piece, just to drag it down. And that left us with this as our final image. And there's more things to tweak. I probably should add some specularity. This guy here is looking a little toy-like. And there's no life in these guys here. They look too happy. This guy looks a little concerned, but not deadly. So there's more to be done, but this is all we're going to have time for now. So I hope you enjoyed the walkthrough. I know it's a lot of information, and I hope that there was something for you in each little part that we covered. So good luck with your work.